Welcome back to Slake Blake. Today, I've got a story for you where cheating went to a whole new level. Get comfortable and enjoy the listen. My name is Nate Calloway, and I'm a software engineer. I build threat detection systems for a defense contractor outside Austin, Texas. The kind of work where you spend 11 hours staring at code, come home smelling like stale coffee and fluorescent lighting, and can't tell your wife a single thing about your day because it's all classified. Megan used to joke about it. "Honey, how was work?" she'd ask. And I'd say, "I could tell you, but then I'd have to bore you to death with the details." And she'd laugh and pour me a Shiner Bock, and we'd sit on the back porch and watch our kids chase fireflies across the yard. We had a good life. I want to be clear about that before I tell you the rest. I met Megan Prescott, maiden name, at a UT football game in 2009. She was 22, I was 24, and she was wearing burnt orange and drinking a Lone Star tall boy and laughing at something her friend said, and I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Not in a magazine way, in a real way. The kind of beautiful that makes you walk across a crowded tailgate lot and say something stupid like, "Excuse me, is that seat taken?" when she was standing up. She said, "There's no seat." I said, "Then I guess we're both standing." She laughed. I bought her a beer. Texas won by 14. We went to dinner at Chewy's on Barton Springs Road that night, and I drove her home to her apartment off Guadalupe Street, and I didn't kiss her because I wanted to see her again, and I figured the wanting was worth more than the having. She told me later that was the moment she knew. We got married in 2012 at her parents' place in New Braunfels. Small ceremony. Hill country sunset. Her father walked her down a limestone path between live oaks, and I stood there in a suit I'd bought at Men's Warehouse and tried not to cry and failed. 42 guests. Brisket from Kreutz Market. Dancing to George Strait on a plywood floor her brother built in the backyard. Best day of my life, and I don't say that lightly. By the time everything fell apart, we'd been married 12 years. We had 2 kids, Cody, 10, and Lily, 7. We lived in a 4-bedroom house in Cedar Park that we'd bought when prices were still reasonable. Before Austin exploded and every third person on your street worked for Tesla or Apple or Oracle. I drove a Chevy Silverado, charcoal gray, 3 years old, paid off. Megan drove a Tesla Model Y, midnight blue, that I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary because she'd been talking about going electric for years, and I wanted to do something big. Something that said I was paying attention. The Tesla was registered in my name. The loan was in my name. The insurance was in my name. I want you to remember that. Megan worked in pharmaceutical sales, a regional rep for one of the big companies covering Central Texas. She was good at it. Charismatic, organized, relentless. She made close to 6 figures in a good year with commissions, which was more than I'd expected when she first took the job, and less than she deserved given how hard she worked. At least, that's what I thought at the time. I thought a lot of things at the time. Looking back, the signs were there. They always are. You just have to be willing to see them, and I wasn't. Not for a long time. It started, or rather, it started becoming visible, about 18 months before the end. Little things. The kind of things that, individually, mean nothing, and collectively mean everything. She started dressing differently for work. Not dramatically, just sharper. New blouses from Nordstrom instead of the Ann Taylor stuff she'd been wearing for years. A perfume I didn't recognize. Something woodsy and expensive that wasn't the Coco Mademoiselle I'd been buying her for Christmas since 2014. She said her friend Lindsay recommended it. I didn't think twice. The gym membership. After years of doing Peloton in the garage, she joined an Equinox across town. 45-minute drive each way. The classes are better, she said. The trainers actually know what they're doing. She went 3 mornings a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Sometimes she'd be gone 3 hours. I grabbed coffee with Lindsay after, she'd say. Lindsay was doing a lot of heavy lifting in those days. The phone. Always face down on the counter, always locked. She'd changed her passcode, said she read an article about phone security and wanted something longer than 4 digits. I'm a cybersecurity professional. I literally build systems to detect deception. And I believed her because she was my wife, and I loved her. And love makes you stupid in the most specific, targeted way possible. The late nights. Her territory had expanded, she said. More accounts, more dinners with doctors and hospital administrators, quarterly reviews in San Antonio, Dallas, Houston. Overnights that used to happen twice a quarter started happening twice a month. She always had receipts. She always had stories about the Marriott or the Hampton Inn and which colleague had too many drinks at dinner. And me? I was heads down in code. A major project with a hard deadline. 12-hour days, sometimes 14. I was present in the house, but absent in the marriage. And I know that now. I'm not making excuses for her. There are no excuses for what she did. But I'm honest enough to say I wasn't winning any Husband of the Year awards. The kids got my weekends. Megan got whatever was left over, which wasn't much. My father used to say that a marriage is like a fence. You've got to walk the line every day and fix the weak spots before the cattle get out. I wasn't walking the line, but I wasn't the one who cut the wire either. The discovery didn't come in a flash. It came in a software update notification. It was a Thursday evening in October. The kids were asleep. Megan was at a work dinner in San Antonio, or so she said. I was on my laptop in the kitchen, half watching the Astros lose to the Rangers in the ALCS, when I got an email from Tesla. Routine stuff. A new software version was available for the Model Y, release notes for some parking assist improvement, and a Dashcam update. I almost deleted it. But I'd been meaning to check on the car's tire pressure. Megan had mentioned a dashboard warning, so I opened the Tesla app. And there it was, the trip history. Now, I need to explain something about Tesla's data collection for people who don't own one. The car logs everything. Every trip, start to finish, origin, destination, miles driven, time departed, time arrived, energy consumed, route taken. Sentry mode records video from external cameras when the car is parked and detects motion. And the dash cam, the cabin-facing camera that Tesla installed for safety monitoring, that records too. All of it syncs to your Tesla account. And if you're the account holder, you have access to all of it through the API. I was the account holder. I'd never looked at the trip data before. Why would I? I trusted my wife. But that night, sitting at the kitchen counter with a Shiner Bock going warm beside my laptop, I noticed something. The app showed the Model Y's current location, not in San Antonio, in Austin. Parked at an address in Tarrytown, one of the older, wealthier neighborhoods west of Mopac. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe she came back early. Maybe the dinner ended and she drove home and she was at a colleague's house for a nightcap. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. There's always a reasonable explanation if you want one badly enough. I didn't want one. Not anymore. Something had shifted in my chest. That cold, dense feeling you get when your body knows the truth before your brain is willing to process it. I opened the trip history. I scrolled back. 3 weeks of data showed on the app. I saw the usual: school drop-offs, the Equinox gym, the HEB on 183, her office in the domain. But I also saw trips to that Tarrytown address. 14 times in 3 weeks. Usually in the late afternoon, between 2 and 5:30 p.m. Sometimes in the evening, on nights she'd told me she was at dinner with clients. My hands were steady. I want you to know that. I'm an engineer. When something breaks, you don't panic. You diagnose. I put down the beer. I opened my laptop. And I did what I do for a living. I pulled data. The Tesla API is well documented. If you're technical, you can query it directly. I wrote a Python script in about 40 minutes that pulled the complete trip history for the Model Y going back 18 months. Every trip, Every timestamp, every GPS coordinate, duration, distance. I exported it to a spreadsheet. Then I cross-referenced the Terrytown address against public property records. The house belonged to Trevor Ashworth, age 42, regional director for Megan's pharmaceutical company, her boss's boss. I sat in the kitchen until 2 in the morning. I didn't move. I didn't pour another drink. I just sat there, staring at 18 months of trip data on a spreadsheet, watching the pattern emerge like a photograph developing in acid. Tuesday afternoons, Thursday evenings. Occasional Saturdays when I had the kids at my parents' place. The gym trips on those days? The Model Y never went to Equinox. It went to Terrytown. Every time. For 18 months. At 2:15 a.m., I closed the laptop. I went upstairs. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom. Our empty bedroom because she was at that address right now, at this moment. And I looked at the bed we'd shared for 12 years. The quilt her grandmother made. The nightstand with her reading glasses and the novel she was halfway through. The framed photo from our honeymoon in Fredericksburg. I went to the garage. I sat on the concrete floor next to the Peloton she didn't use anymore. I put my hands on my knees and I breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way they taught us in the stress inoculation training my company required. In and out. In and out. I didn't cry. I wanted to. The pressure behind my eyes was enormous, like something trying to crack through from inside. But I didn't let it. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. I went back to the kitchen and opened the laptop again. This time, I pulled the Dashcam footage. Let me explain something about Dashcam recordings in a Tesla. The cabin camera, the one facing inward, above the rearview mirror, was originally designed for driver monitoring. But in certain configurations, particularly with Sentry Mode active, it records video and audio. If you have the data stored on a USB drive in the glove box or synced through the app, and if you're the vehicle owner with account access, you can download those files. I was the vehicle owner. I had account access. And Megan had never turned off the cabin camera because she didn't know how, and I'd never told her because it never mattered before. It took me 2 nights to go through it all. I did it after the kids were asleep, in the garage, on my work laptop with noise-canceling headphones. I told Megan I was on a deadline, which was true, in a way. I was on the most important deadline of my life. The first recording I found was from 4 months ago. The Model Y was parked in Trevor Ashworth's driveway. The cabin camera showed Megan in the driver's seat, Trevor in the passenger seat. They were talking. Just talking. No physical contact in the car, at least not on this clip. But the conversation made my stomach drop through the floor. She was talking about money. Our money. The 401k is in both names, but the brokerage account is just his, she said. If I move some of the joint savings into my personal account gradually, like $2,000 or $3,000 a month, he won't notice. He never checks the statements. He just looks at the balance app on his phone. Trevor said something I couldn't quite make out. Megan laughed. No, the house is tricky. Texas is a community property state. But my attorney says if I can show he was emotionally absent, the long hours, the classified work he can't talk about, the way he checks out, then I've got a strong case for primary custody and a bigger share of the assets. I paused the recording. I took off the headphones. I sat in the garage in the dark and I listened to my own breathing. She had an attorney. She was already planning the divorce. She was going to leave me. But first, she was going to strip me down to the studs. I put the headphones back on. I kept watching. There were dozens of recordings. Not all of them contained conversation. Many were just Sentry Mode clips of her parking and walking away, or short drives with the radio on. But scattered across 18 months, I found 23 recordings with substantive audio. Some were phone calls she'd made while driving. To Trevor, to a woman named Diane, who I later learned was her divorce attorney, to Lindsay, who, it turned out, actually did exist but was fully aware of the affair and was helping cover for her. I cataloged every recording, date, time, duration, summary of content. I'm an engineer. This is what I do. I find the signal in the noise. Here's what the recordings told me. The affair had been going on for at least 20 months, longer than the trip data went back. Trevor Ashworth was not just her boss's boss. He was going through his own divorce, which had apparently been the initial bonding event. Two unhappy married people, working late, sharing war stories, and then sharing a hotel room at a conference in Dallas. The oldest story in the world. Megan had hired a divorce attorney, Diane Kellner, a partner at a firm in downtown Austin, 8 months before I pulled that first trip record. 8 months. She'd been building her case against me for the better part of a year while sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, and kissing my children goodnight. The financial plan was methodical. She'd been moving money. Small amounts, like she said, 2,000 or 3,000 at a time, redirected from our joint savings into a personal account I didn't know existed at Frostbank. Over 8 months, she'd moved almost $22,000. She'd also been documenting my work hours, my absences, my emotional unavailability, building a narrative for the custody hearings she was planning. And then there was the recording that broke me. It was from 6 weeks before I found the trip data. A Saturday afternoon. The Model Y was parked at a coffee shop on South Congress. Megan was on the phone with Lindsay. The timing has to be right, Megan said. Trevor's divorce should be final by January. I file in February, maybe March. By then I'll have enough documented to show the pattern. Nate's never home, Nate doesn't engage, Nate prioritizes work over his family. My attorney says with the right judge, I get primary custody, the house, and 60% of the assets. Lindsay said something. Megan said, he'll be fine. I mean, he'll be devastated at first, but he's not the kind of guy who falls apart. He'll throw himself into work. He always does. She paused. I'm going to leave him just enough to keep a roof over his head. Just enough so he can't go crying to a judge that I left him with nothing. I'm not a monster. Leave him just enough to keep a roof over his head. That sentence. Those words. In her voice. The same voice that whispered, I love you to me every night. The same voice that sang, you are my sunshine to our daughter when she couldn't sleep. That voice, calculating exactly how much of my life she could strip away while keeping just enough plausible deniability to sleep at night. I took off the headphones. I set them on the workbench. I walked to the corner of the garage, behind the lawnmower and the stack of moving boxes we'd never unpacked, and I put my hands on my knees and I threw up. Not much. I hadn't eaten since lunch. But my body was done pretending everything was okay, even if my mind wasn't. I stayed in that corner for a long time. I don't know how long. Long enough for the cold of the concrete to seep through my jeans. Long enough for my breathing to slow down and my hands to stop shaking. Then I stood up. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I went back to the workbench, put the headphones on, and finished cataloging the recordings. Because here's the thing about discovering that the person you love most in the world has been planning to destroy you. It clarifies everything. Every ambiguity, every gray area, every maybe I'm overreacting. Gone. Burned clean. What's left is pure signal. And the signal said, move, now, quietly, before she does. I made one decision that night. I was going to beat her to the courthouse. And when I got there, I was going to bring 18 months of evidence that her own car had recorded for me. I spent the next 4 weeks living 2 lives. The first life was the one Megan saw. The husband who came home at 6:30, kissed her on the cheek, asked about her day, helped Cody with his math homework, and read Junie B. Jones to Lily before bed. The husband who grilled chicken on Saturday, watched football on Sunday, and fell asleep on the couch during the 10 o'clock news. Normal, predictable, oblivious. The second life was the one I lived between midnight and 5 a.m., in the garage, on a laptop she didn't know I had. Day 1. I called in a favor. Rick Haddad, everyone called him Bull, was my college roommate at UT and the godfather of my son. Former Marine, now a private wealth advisor at Merrill Lynch. Not a lawyer, not an investigator, but the smartest person I knew when it came to protecting assets and the most loyal friend a man could ask for. I met him at a Whataburger on 620 at 7 in the morning before work. I sat across from him in a corner booth and told him everything. The trip data, the recordings, the financial plan. He listened without interrupting. He ate his breakfast taquitos methodically, like a man processing information. When I finished, he put down his taquito, wiped his hands on a napkin, and said, "What do you need?" "An attorney," I said. "The best one in Austin. Someone who's seen this before." "Jim Hadley," Bull said without hesitation. "He handled my cousin's divorce in San Antonio. The man is a surgeon. He doesn't yell, he doesn't grandstand, he just wins. I'll have his number to you by noon." He did. I called at 12:15. Jim Hadley's assistant put me through immediately. Bull had already called ahead. I was in his office by 5 that evening. Jim Hadley was about 60, silver-haired, with the quiet confidence of a man who'd spent 30 years watching marriages come apart and knew exactly how the pieces fell. His office was in a limestone building on West 6th Street, with framed degrees from UT Law and SMU, and a bookshelf that held more binders than books. He shook my hand, sat me down, and said, "Rick tells me you have a situation. Walk me through it." I walked him through it. I'd brought my laptop. I showed him the trip data, the spreadsheets, the Dashcam catalog. I played him 3 recordings, including the one about leaving me just enough. He listened to the whole thing with his hands folded on his desk. When the last recording ended, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "I've practiced family law in Texas for 3 decades. I have never, and I mean never, seen a client walk in with this kind of evidence on day 1. Most people come to me with suspicions. You've come to me with a prosecution file." "Is it admissible?" I asked. That was the only question that mattered. "Texas is a one-party consent state for recordings," he said. "But these recordings weren't made by you or by a party to the conversation. They were made by a vehicle's built-in recording system, in a vehicle you own and is registered in your name. The legal question is whether the occupants of the vehicle had a reasonable expectation of privacy in a car they knew had a dashcam system." He paused. "I'll research the specific case law, but my initial assessment is that we're on solid ground. She was in your car using your dashcam system, and she never deactivated it. That's not wiretapping. That's negligence on her part." "What about the financial evidence? The money she's been moving?" "Dissipation of marital assets," he said. "In Texas, community property includes everything earned during the marriage. If she's been secretly moving community funds into a personal account with the intention of hiding them from you during the divorce, that's sanctionable. The court can, and likely will, factor it into the division." He made a note on a yellow legal pad. "How much has she moved?" $22,000, roughly. Over 8 months. We'll trace every dollar. I'll want your bank statements, her bank statements, which we'll subpoena, and any documentation you have. The recordings where she discusses the transfers are gold." He leaned back in his chair. "Here's my advice, Nate. Don't change a thing at home. Don't confront her. Don't hint. Don't let your behavior shift in any way. You have one advantage that most men in your position don't have. She doesn't know you know. As long as that advantage holds, we control the timeline, we control the narrative, and we control the outcome." "How long do I have to keep pretending?" 4 weeks, maybe 5. I need time to prepare the petition, compile the financial discovery, get everything in order." When we file, I want it to be airtight. I want her attorney, and she does have one based on what you've told me, to open our petition and realize immediately that every move she's made has been documented. 4 weeks. I could do 4 weeks. I'd already been living with a stranger for 18 months without knowing it. 4 more weeks was nothing. One more thing, Jim said. The affair partner, Trevor Ashworth. What do you know about his situation? He's going through his own divorce. He's her superior at the company, not her direct boss, but 2 levels up. Is there a company policy on workplace relationships, particularly between managers and subordinates? Every pharmaceutical company I know of has one. Jim made another note. We won't lead with that. But it's a card we hold. If his behavior during mediation or settlement is obstructionist, it's useful to have. I left Jim Hadley's office at 7:30 that evening. I drove home in the Silverado, pulled into the driveway next to the midnight blue Model Y, and sat in the cab for 5 minutes. The dashboard clock glowed. The house glowed. Through the kitchen window, I could see Megan moving around, probably making dinner. The silhouette of the woman I'd loved for 15 years, framed in warm light, doing something as ordinary as stirring a pot. I went inside. I kissed her on the cheek. I asked about her day. She said it was fine. I said mine was fine too. We sat down to dinner with our children and I ate her cooking and laughed at Cody's joke about his math teacher and helped Lily cut her chicken. And I did not let a single thing show on my face. Not one thing. That night, after she fell asleep, I went to the garage and cried. Not sobbing. I don't do that. Just tears running down my face in the dark while I sat on the concrete floor and listened to the house creak and settle around me. 12 years. 2 kids. A life I thought was real. And the whole time, she'd been measuring me for the box she was going to put me in. I gave myself 10 minutes. Then I washed my face in the garage utility sink, dried it with a shop towel, and went back to work. Over the next 4 weeks, I executed a checklist. Jim Hadley gave me the framework. Bull helped with the financial pieces. I did the rest. Week 1, financial forensics. I pulled every financial document in the house. Tax returns going back 7 years. Mortgage statements. Both 401k accounts. Mine at Fidelity, hers at Vanguard. The brokerage account at Schwab that was in my name. Joint savings statements from Chase. Joint checking statements. Credit card statements. The Amex. The Visa. The Target card. I made copies of everything and stored them in a safe deposit box at a Wells Fargo branch that Megan had never been to. Bull co-signed the box as a secondary key holder. Then I did the forensic work. I went through the Chase savings statements line by line for the past 12 months. Megan was right about one thing. I hadn't been checking the statements. But the transfers were there. Quiet, regular, like a drip irrigation system. 2,500 here, 3,000 there, always to an external account ending in 7744 that I'd never authorized. Over 10 months, longer than I'd initially estimated, she'd moved $26,800. I documented every transfer. Date, amount, remaining balance, running total. I created a spreadsheet that would later become Exhibit C in our mediation binder. Week 2, the evidence package. I spent 3 nights editing the Dashcam recordings. Not altering them, selecting them. Of the 23 substantive recordings, I chose the 12 most relevant. The ones that showed her discussing the financial transfers. The ones that referenced her attorney. The ones that laid out her custody strategy. And the just enough recording. I burned them to 2 USB drives. One for Jim. One for the safe deposit box. I also compiled the complete trip log. 18 months of GPS data showing 127 trips to Trevor Ashworth's Terrytown address into a color-coded spreadsheet. Green for days she told me she was at the gym. Yellow for days she said she was at a client dinner. Red for overnights when she said she was at a conference. I cross-referenced every entry with our text messages, which I'd exported from my phone. For every trip to Terrytown, I found a corresponding text from Megan explaining where she supposedly was. It was meticulous. It was brutal. It was the kind of work I do for a living, applied to the wreckage of my own marriage. Jim Hadley reviewed the package on a Wednesday afternoon in his office. He spent 2 hours going through everything. When he finished, he took off his reading glasses, set them on his desk, and looked at me. "I've been doing this for 31 years, he said. "I've represented clients in over 400 divorces. This is the most comprehensive evidence package I've ever worked with. The financial dissipation alone would swing the property division in your favor. The recordings, assuming we clear the admissibility hurdle, and I'm now confident we will, change the entire landscape." "How so?" "Because she's not just a spouse who committed adultery. She's a spouse who committed adultery, secretly retained counsel, began systematically dissipating community assets, and planned a litigation strategy designed to misrepresent the marriage to the court. That's not a wife who made a mistake. That's a wife who ran a campaign. And we have her own words, in her own voice, describing it." He paused. "Judges in Texas have broad discretion in dividing community property. The standard is just and right. When one spouse has been caught planning to defraud the other, just and right tends to move significantly in the defrauded spouse's direction." Week 3. Personal preparation. I found an apartment. 2-bedroom, in a complex in Round Rock, close to the kids' school. Clean, anonymous, available immediately. I signed the lease under my name and paid the deposit from my new personal account at USAA, a bank I'd opened the week before, redirecting my direct deposit. I didn't furnish it yet. Just signed the paper so I had somewhere to go. I packed a go bag, documents, laptop, 3 days of clothes, medications, phone charger. I left it in the trunk of the Silverado. I changed every password. Email, social media, banking, cloud storage. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything. I backed up family photos to a separate Google Drive account. I talked to my parents. That was the hardest conversation of the 4 weeks. My mother cried. My father, a retired Air Force Master Sergeant who'd been married to her for 43 years, went very still, the way he does when he's processing something that makes him want to break things. He asked me one question. "Are you sure?" I played him 20 seconds of the just enough recording. He nodded once. He said, "What do you need?" "I need you and Mom to take the kids on filing day. Tell them it's a special weekend with Grandpa and Grandma. I'll explain everything to them when it's done." Consider it done. I talked to Cody's teacher and Lily's teacher. Quietly, privately, I told them that our family was going through a transition and to please let me know if either child's behavior changed. Both teachers were kind. Both had seen it before. Week 4, the filing. Jim Hadley filed the original petition for divorce on a Monday morning in Travis County. At 10 a.m., a process server delivered the petition to Megan's office in the domain. At 10:15 a.m., Jim's paralegal served a subpoena on Frostbank for the records of the account ending in 7744. At 10:30 a.m., Jim faxed a preservation notice to Megan's attorney, Diane Kellner, notifying her that her client had been systematically dissipating marital assets and that any further transfers would be reported to the court. I wasn't there for any of it. I was at work, at my desk, staring at code I couldn't read, waiting for my phone to ring. It rang at 10:47 a.m. Megan. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 10:52 and 10:58 and 11:03. 4 calls. 1 text. "Nate, call me, Now, I texted back, all communication through counsel. Jim Hadley, Hadley and Associates, 512-555-0174. Then I turned off my phone, put it in my desk drawer, and went back to work. Or tried to. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the sheer gravitational pull of a 12-year marriage coming apart in real time. The physics of it. The sound it makes inside your chest. Bull texted me at noon from a number I didn't recognize. He'd bought a burner phone, because that's the kind of friend Bull is. She called your mom. Your mom didn't pick up. Your dad sent her a text that said, "Contact Nate's attorney." She tried me next. I said the same thing. She's rattled, brother. Stay the course. I stayed the course. The mediation was scheduled for 6 weeks after filing. Texas requires mediation before trial in most family law cases, and Jim wanted it. We don't want a trial, he told me. Trials are expensive, unpredictable, and public. Mediation is private. And with our evidence package, mediation is where we win. The 6 weeks between filing and mediation were strange. I'd moved into the Round Rock apartment, which was furnished now. Bull and his wife helped me set it up one weekend with stuff from IKEA and a couch from Costco. The kids stayed with me Wednesday nights and every other weekend, per the temporary orders the court issued. Megan had hired a second attorney, a litigator named Paul Becker from a bigger firm, because apparently Diane Kellner had taken one look at our evidence list and realized she was in over her head. Megan tried to contact me directly 4 times. Each time I referred her to Jim. She sent me a letter, handwritten, 4 pages, that Jim intercepted and logged as correspondence. He summarized it for me. She was sorry, she wanted to explain. It wasn't what I thought. Could we please talk for the children's sake? Jim said, "Do you want to read it?" I said no. The hardest part was the kids. Cody was old enough to know something was very wrong. He got quiet. He started sleeping with his door closed, which he'd never done before. One night at my apartment, he sat on the edge of his bed and said, "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" "Yes, buddy, we are." "Is it because of the man who comes to the house?" I felt the floor tilt. "What man?" "The man in the silver car. He came over sometimes when you were at work. Mom said he was from her office, but he came a lot." I sat down next to my son. I put my arm around him. I said, "Your mom and I have some grown-up problems we need to work out, but I want you to know 2 things. First, I love you and your sister more than anything in the world, and that will never change. Second, none of this is your fault, not one bit of it. Okay?" He nodded. He leaned into me. I held him for a long time. Later, after he was asleep, I sat in the kitchen of my mostly empty apartment and stared at the wall and thought about my son watching a silver car pull into our driveway and wondering what it meant. My 10-year-old boy, carrying that weight, not knowing how to ask about it. I poured a Jim Beam. I nursed it for an hour. I didn't pour another. The mediation was held at a neutral office suite in downtown Austin, a conference room on the 14th floor of a building on Congress Avenue, with a view of the Capitol Dome and the late November sky. Jim and I arrived at 8:45 a.m. I wore slacks and a button-down. No tie. Jim said ties made men look like they were trying too hard. Megan and her team arrived at 9 o'clock. I saw her through the glass partition as she walked down the hall. She looked thin. Drawn. She was wearing a navy blazer and her hair was pulled back and she looked like a woman who hadn't been sleeping. For 1 second, just one, I felt something old and familiar stir in my chest. Then I remembered the recording. Leave him just enough. The feeling died. Her attorney, Paul Becker, was a big man in a charcoal suit who looked like he'd played linebacker at Texas A&M. He nodded to Jim. Jim nodded back. They knew each other. Of course they did. The mediator was a retired family court judge named Eleanor Walsh, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She explained the process. Joint session first, then separate rooms, with her shuttling between. The goal was to reach a settlement agreement by end of day. Jim said, "Your Honor, Eleanor, before we go to separate rooms, I'd like to present some evidence that I believe will be material to our discussions. I've provided copies to opposing counsel, but given the nature of the recordings, I think it's important that both parties and the mediator hear them together." Paul Becker frowned. "We received the exhibit list, but we haven't had adequate time to review." "You've had them for 2 weeks, Paul," Jim said mildly, per the mediation agreement. Eleanor Walsh looked at Becker. "Has your client reviewed the exhibits?" Becker glanced at Megan. Something passed between them. A hesitation. "We've reviewed the documents, the recordings. We've had technical difficulties with the format." "They're MP4 files," Jim said. "Standard format. I also provided a transcript." Eleanor nodded. "Play them." Jim opened his laptop. He'd selected 3 recordings, arranged in chronological order. He connected to the room's speaker system and pressed play. The first recording was from 14 months ago. Megan's voice, clear and recognizable, talking to Trevor in the Model Y about the brokerage account and the transfer strategy. I watched Megan's face. She went white. Not gradually, instantaneously, like someone had pulled a plug. Her mouth opened slightly. Her hands, folded on the conference table, tightened until her knuckles matched the tablecloth. The second recording was from 8 months ago. Megan on the phone with Diane Kellner, her original attorney, discussing the custody narrative, the documentation of my work hours, the plan to portray me as emotionally absent. Paul Becker's jaw tightened. He was hearing this for the first time. I could tell because he turned to Megan and she wouldn't meet his eyes. The third recording was the one. "I'm going to leave him just enough to keep a roof over his head." The room was very quiet when it ended. Eleanor Walsh took off her glasses and set them on the table. Paul Becker was staring at his notepad. Megan was crying, silently, tears running down her face, not wiping them away. Jim closed the laptop. He spoke calmly, the way a surgeon narrates a procedure. "In addition to these recordings, we have 18 months of GPS data from the Tesla's trip log showing 127 visits to the home of the co-respondent Trevor Ashworth on days when Mrs. Calloway represented to Mr. Calloway that she was at the gym, at client dinners, or at conferences. We have bank records showing $26,800 in community funds transferred to a personal account over a 10-month period. And we have the complete Dashcam archive, including 23 recordings with substantive audio, all captured by a vehicle owned and registered to Mr. Calloway." He turned to Eleanor Walsh. "Mr. Calloway is not seeking to punish his wife. He is seeking a just and right division of community property, consistent with the evidence of dissipation. He is seeking a custody arrangement that reflects his active and documented role as a parent. And he is seeking a clean, final resolution so that both parties can move forward." Paul Becker asked for a recess. Eleanor granted it. The other side went to their room. Through the door before it closed, I heard Becker's voice, low and tight. "Why didn't you tell me about the recordings?" The recess lasted 90 minutes. Jim and I sat in our room. He drank coffee, I drank water. "How bad is it for them?" I asked. "As bad as it gets without a criminal charge," Jim said. "The dissipation evidence alone shifts the property division 60-40 in your favor, maybe 65-35. The recordings, particularly the one about leaving you just enough, those tell a story of premeditated financial fraud against a spouse. No judge in Texas is going to look at that favorably. Becker knows it. Right now, he's telling her that going to trial with this evidence would be catastrophic. What do you think they'll offer?" I think they'll ask what we want, and I think we should tell them. Here's what we asked for. I kept the house. I kept the Silverado. I kept my 401k and the brokerage account. Megan kept her 401k and the Tesla, which, as the vehicle that had recorded everything, felt like a kind of poetic justice I didn't comment on out loud. The $26,800 she'd transferred was credited back to me from her share of the remaining community assets. We split the kids' 529 plans 50-50. I got primary custody. The kids lived with me during the school week. She got weekends and half of holidays. Child support was calculated by formula. What Megan walked away with, essentially, was what she'd brought into the marriage: her retirement account, her personal belongings, and the car. Everything we'd built together, the house, the savings, the investments, the life, stayed with me. Paul Becker negotiated for 4 hours. He was good, professional, persistent, creative. He tried to argue that the recordings were obtained without consent. Jim cited Texas one-party consent law and the vehicle ownership. He tried to argue that the dissipation was actually legitimate household expenses. Jim produced the Frost Bank records, showing the money sitting untouched in a savings account, never spent on household anything. He tried to argue that my work absences constituted constructive abandonment. Jim produced my employment records, showing I averaged 47 hours a week, above average, but not extreme, and my school pickup logs, coaching records for Cody's soccer team, and attendance at every parent-teacher conference for the past 5 years. At 4:30 p.m., Paul Becker came back with a counteroffer that was, in substance, 90% of what we'd asked for. Jim looked at me. I nodded. We signed the mediated settlement agreement at 5:15 p.m. Megan signed it too, in a conference room across the hall, without looking at me. I was told later that she cried through the entire signing. I don't know how I feel about that. I used to know exactly how I'd feel. I'd feel guilty. I'd feel like I should comfort her. I'd feel like maybe we could fix this if we just talked. Now I don't feel any of those things. I just feel the absence of them. Jim shook my hand in the parking garage. You handled this well, Nate, he said. A lot of men in your position would have lost their composure months ago. You kept your head. That's why this worked. I thanked him. I got in the Silverado. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, hands on the wheel, engine off. The parking garage was quiet. The concrete walls were cool and gray and featureless. I looked at my wedding ring, still on my left hand, because I hadn't taken it off yet, because taking it off meant admitting it was real. I slid it off. I put it in the cup holder. I started the engine and drove home, to the house in Cedar Park that was mine now. Just mine. That was 3.5 years ago. I'm writing this from the back porch of that same house on a Saturday evening in April. The live oak in the backyard has gotten bigger. It throws shade over most of the lawn now, which Cody complains about because it makes the grass patchy. He's 13 and cares about the lawn because he's the one who mows it, and I pay him $25 a week, which he's saving for a gaming PC. Lily is 10 and sitting cross-legged on the porch swing, reading a book about marine biology because she's decided she wants to be a veterinarian, or maybe a marine biologist, or possibly both. She changes her mind every Tuesday. There's a woman in my kitchen. Her name is Sarah Odom. She's 39, a large animal veterinarian with a practice in Georgetown, and she has a 6-year-old daughter named Hazel from a previous marriage that ended, not through infidelity, but through the quieter erosion of two people who married too young and grew in different directions. We met at a school fundraiser. Hazel and Lily are in the same Girl Scout troop. We talked for 10 minutes about nothing important, and I thought, that was something. It was something. It's been something for almost 2 years now. Sarah doesn't push. She doesn't probe. She knows my story. I told her on our third date over tacos at Torchy's on South First because I didn't want to build anything new on a foundation of things unsaid. She listened. She said, "That must have been hell." I said, "It was." She said, "You seem like you came through it okay." I said, "Most days." She squeezed my hand and we ordered another round of queso, and that was that. No drama, no performance, just two people with scars, eating tacos, deciding to be honest with each other. Right now, she's making enchiladas from her grandmother's recipe, the one with the homemade red sauce that takes an hour. And I can hear her through the screen door, humming something by Patsy Cline, while Hazel sits at the counter and helps by licking the spoon. Cody is in the garage doing pull-ups on the bar I installed last year. The dog, a mixed-breed mutt named Hank that Lily rescued from the Austin Pets Alive shelter, is asleep on the porch at my feet. It's not the life I planned. It's smaller in some ways and bigger in others. The house is the same house, but it feels different. Lighter, maybe, like someone opened all the windows and let the old air out. I painted the bedroom. I replaced the quilt. I took down some photos and put up new ones. Not in anger, just because a house should reflect the people who live in it, and I'm not the same person who hung those pictures. Megan lives in an apartment in South Austin. She works for a different pharmaceutical company, a smaller one, regional. Trevor Ashworth lasted about 6 months after our divorce was finalized. His own divorce cleaned him out, and whatever Megan had imagined their future would look like, it turned out to be something less. A lot less. He took a transfer to the Houston office. Last I heard, he was there, doing whatever it is he does. I don't think about him. He's irrelevant. He was always irrelevant. A symptom, not the disease. Megan sees the kids every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. She's a decent mother in the hours she has. I won't take that from her. Whatever she did to me, she loves Cody and Lily, and they need their mother, and I'm not the kind of man who uses his children as weapons. My parents raised me better than that. She tried to talk to me once, about a year after the divorce. She was dropping off the kids on a Sunday evening and she lingered at the door and said, "Nate, I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. Not for the divorce. I think we both know the marriage was in trouble, but for the way I did it. The planning, the money, the things I said in that car. I was a different person then, and I'm ashamed of who I was." I looked at her for a long time. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Not in a cruel way. In the way people look when they've lost something they can't replace and they know it. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Megan." She nodded. She got in the Tesla. She still drives it, which I try not to find symbolic. And she drove away. I closed the door and went inside and helped Lily with her science project and didn't think about it again until right now, writing this down. I don't hate her. I want to be clear about that. Hatred is a lease you sign on someone else's property. You're paying rent to live in their world, and they're not even charging you enough to make it worth the space. I canceled that lease a long time ago. What I feel now is something closer to nothing. Not numbness. I'm not numb. I laugh, I love, I get angry at the Longhorns when they blow a fourth-quarter lead. I'm fully operational. I just don't have a Megan-shaped space in my emotional architecture anymore. She used to be the load-bearing wall. Now she's a room I sealed off and don't enter. Some nights I sit on this porch and think about the Tesla, about the fact that the car I bought her as an anniversary gift, a gesture of love, of paying attention, of wanting to give her something she'd been dreaming about. That car was the thing that saved me. Every trip to Terrytown, logged. Every conversation with Trevor, recorded. Every whispered plan to dismantle my life, captured in crisp digital audio by a cabin camera she never thought to disable. She drove 127 times to his house. She sat in my car and planned my destruction. And the car remembered every mile. My father would call that providence. Bull would call it karma. Jim Hadley would call it fortuitous evidentiary circumstances. I just call it what it is. The luckiest break a man in the worst situation of his life ever got. Sarah just called me inside. The enchiladas are ready. Hazel set the table. She put the forks on the wrong side, which she does every time. And I've decided it's our tradition now. Cody's coming in from the garage, wiping his hands on his shorts, already asking if there's queso. Lily's marking her page with a sticky note and carrying Hank inside because he wants to eat with us, Dad. The house smells like red chili and melted cheese and something sweet that might be the candle Sarah lit on the counter, or might just be the particular scent of a home that has people in it who want to be there. That's enough. That's more than enough. I read something once, I don't remember where, that said the best revenge is a life well lived. I used to think that was a platitude, the kind of thing people stitch on throw pillows when they can't afford therapy. But I think I understand it now. It's not about revenge at all. It's about the moment you realize that the person who tried to take everything from you failed. Not because you outmaneuvered them, although I did. Not because the system worked in your favor, although it did. But because the life you built after is better than the life they tried to steal. Because you're sitting on your porch on a Saturday in April, listening to your kids argue about whose turn it is to feed the dog, and the woman in your kitchen is humming Patsy Cline, and the sun is going down over Cedar Park in that particular shade of burnt orange that only Texas gets, right? And you realize, with a calm that goes all the way down to your bones, I'm good. I'm really good. And that, if you're wondering, is the whole story.